Good afternoon. I'm John Horwich, President and CEO of Easter Seals DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I'm pleased to welcome you to this edition of Candid Conversations, our webinar series that addresses important issues affecting our community. As a reminder, you can access replays of all of our past sessions and sign up for future ones at candidconversations.eseal.org. As part of our mission to expand opportunities for all children and adults in our communities, today's session focuses on a topic critical to helping each child reach their full potential. Every fall, when the new school year begins, teachers see students whose academic performance has declined over the summer. Recent research suggests that the effect can be particularly harmful for students with disabilities and those from low-income families, for whom the summer break can deepen achievement gaps. This year, the problem is particularly acute given the challenges that came with learning through the pandemic. With support, young learners will begin the next school year strong, and this webinar can help you deliver that support. I hope you'll find this conversation useful, and I'm especially grateful to our partners at the Military Child Education Coalition, Partners in Promise, and the University of District of Columbia for participating today. Now I'm pleased to introduce our moderator, Tara Phillips, the Senior Director of Child Development here at Easter Seals DC, Maryland, Virginia. Tara is an exceptional educator and leader who holds certificates in education as well as an MBA. She's had a 20-year career in early childhood and elementary education, the most recent 6 of those with us here at Easter Seals. Tara?
Thank you, John. Welcome, everyone. And I'd like to take a moment to allow our panelists to introduce themselves. We're going to start with Grace Kim, Board President and Founder of Partners in Promise.
Thank you so much, Tara. I'm delighted to be able to have this candid conversation. Partners in Promise, we are focused on helping our military special education families receive the support and the services that their children need, especially with our highly mobile population. I'm also a special education attorney here in Fairfax, Virginia. And so I have a lot of clients who are described by what John just shared. That summer regression recruitment issue is definitely significant. So I'm really happy to be able to jump into conversation with these wonderful people today.
Thank you so much. And Becky Porter, the President and CEO of Military Child and Education Coalition.
Thank you, Tara. Like Tara said, I'm Becky Porter. I'm the President and CEO of the Military Child Education Coalition, also known as MCEC. MCEC's been around for about 24 years, working on the education challenges that military-connected students have as a result of being in a military family. For example, the transitions because of moves, deployments, separations. So we're looking after their education and well-being, and really happy to be here today for this conversation.
Thank you so much. And I'd also like to introduce Dewan McNair-Lee from the University of District of Columbia.
Hi, Tara, and thank you to everyone else. Greetings. I am Dewan McNair-Lee, and I am transitioning into a role as Assistant Professor of Urban Education in the School of Education at the University of the District of Columbia, which happens to be my undergraduate alma mater. I am transitioning from being a middle school reading English language arts teacher as well as a professional development lead teacher. My focus for the last 15 years or so of my career has been literacy, especially at the middle school level. I've also worked as a tutor and a consultant, helping charter school networks build up their literacy practices. So I am excited to join my experience and conversation with the other panelists present today.
Thank you all so much for those introductions. So we're going to just get right into it and start off by talking about some of the strategies that prevent summer learning loss. I'm going to kind of toss out the question, and whoever wants to come off mute first and share with us some of the strategies that you would recommend. I know that many of our listeners, those who have joined us today, are really anxious to find out, as we have just kind of ended the school year and we can get on top of these things right away. So who would like to take the first jump at strategies that prevent summer learning loss? So share with us what you know or what you'd like to share with us about the summer learning loss, how we can prevent it.
Tara, thank you. I'll go ahead and start. I think I'd like to make just some general recommendations that we like to share with, especially with our parents that we work with, and that is to make whatever things you're doing with your children over the summer be interactive, tailored to kind of their interests. And I would say, especially in the areas of math, reading, and writing, to focus on those and reinforcing the skills that they had at the end of the year. I mean, for everybody, the summer can be a time of loss, especially during the pandemic. But for families that are moving, it's compounded. I have some other specific recommendations, but I'll wait and let some of the other panelists give their overview.
Well, I'm a product of local library summer reading clubs. I remember just getting my first library card and how exciting that was. And the community within that library, the amazing librarians who would just come alongside an excited young reader and help us find our next new adventure. So I recommend, checking out your local libraries. Also, a great resource is just the public schools. Many times there are resources that parents are not aware of. One of them, for instance, is tutor.com. A lot of school districts, as well as for those military connected families, Military One Source has tutor.com as a sponsor. So they will actually provide access over the summer for kids who attend the public school that may be paying for that service already, or if you're in the military, that's another resource available to you. And the reason why I think it's so important to talk to those, the local public library, the public school first, is oftentimes they have all this resource to give, but the question is, how can they get it to the families who need it? So many times it's simply opening that door of conversation, and you'll find many school districts, many teachers are more than willing to help. Another resource that kind of, I don't know if I want to say controversial, but is YouTube. So a lot of our really, well-known academics, as their own personal calling, will put out educational videos on YouTube. Now, as parents, of course, we need to be careful and monitor what it is that our children are watching. But I can't tell you how many times my children and I have come across some amazing math videos that have really helped them to continue working on those math skills over the summer, as well as just finding old episodes of Reading Rainbow to watch. And they had no idea who LeVar Burton was, and I was able to introduce him to my kids. So those are some ways that everyone can access some resources over the summer. And I'm sure, Dewan, you probably have just a host of resources and knowledge from your experience.
Absolutely. You all have named some of the ones that I definitely rely on. The public library, of course, linking up and partnering with the public school system in your area. But I will also be remiss if we didn't discuss community resources, such as museums and other nonprofit organizations. Especially being in DC, there are a lot of free opportunities for students to be engaged in educational but fun activities during the summer. But it's just a matter of being keyed in. Sometimes it's a matter of, I know, especially as a mom of an 11-year-old, one of the things that I do is that I'm just like on Facebook groups for my specific area. And it's like, oh, this is what's happening in my ward. There's going to be a free face painting and conversation about, Juneteenth, or a few months ago at the Anacostia, Smithsonian Anacostia Library, neighborhood library, there was a whole event centered around celebrating Mardi Gras. And there was face painting and storytelling and all of these events, and completely for free. And kids got balloons and all of these things, but they also got that literacy component as well with the storytelling. There have been other events that cycle around holidays and special days in our culture. And oftentimes when those things are coming up, there will be community events around that focus on literacy and math to a lesser extent sometimes. So it's a matter of just being kind of engaged and keeping an ear out for what's happening around your space to see if you're going to be able to be involved, and just kind of sign up for everything. And if you can't make it, but once you start signing up for these things and getting on listservs, what I've found both as a parent and a teacher is that when you start signing up, then you just get everything. You get all of the mailing lists, you get all of the calendars. So you can see that, oh, we can kind of plan out our entire summer around what's happening. And you can have a free list of events going on that would just cost you the effort to get there. So that's one of the things that I think is a very little used resource, especially for underserved communities. But there's a lot happening out there in the community that we can take advantage of.
Those were all really great recommendations and suggestions. I want to ask you all to dig a little bit deeper and think about, you mentioned the activities and the events that are in the areas in your local communities and libraries. Because my background happens to be elementary and early childhood education, one thing that I know is if you cannot keep them moving, you cannot keep them interested. So, however, after the movement, we're gonna try to wrap it up and bring it back to reading and writing somehow. So is there a way that we can kind of make this full circle? So maybe we spend the day in the library, or not the day. That's not fun. Maybe we spend a little while in the library and we spend some time in the museum. Do we then come back home and write a paragraph, a sentence, look at the words, or how exactly do we make this, I hate to say it like this, but more academic, other than the activity? One of the experiences that I had, I taught fourth grade. And so one of the experiences that I had is that when it was time to come back into the classroom and sit down, and I honestly, to just sit down, that was just a simple task. It was very difficult to get them to sit down. So they had all this activity and constant movement in the summer. And when it's time to come back to the classroom and sit down, that was difficult. So any suggestions on how we can have the activities and the fun things that where they are learning without knowing they're learning, and then bring that back in to kind of sit down and do something that would be more like what happens at a desk? Or do you not recommend that in the summertime? So I don't mean to imply that you have to do one.
I want to jump in here as I'm thinking about, especially museums. When you, just about any museum that you log on to, I'm not partial to Smithsonian museums because I like free, but when you log on to any museum's website, specifically again, Smithsonian, there's a space for educators and there's a space for families. When you click on either one of those spaces, and I encourage families to peek on what's available for educators, but there are oftentimes materials that are suitable for when you are coming into the physical location. So you can download these resources, print them out if you have access to a printer, and you and your children can go around the museum and kind of take these guided tours or these guided exercises. So you're not taking in all of this information, because that can be really daunting for kids when they're going into a space and it's like 5 floors and 10 rooms of floor. And what are we looking at? That's a picture. That's this. Well, how about we just spend the day in this particular section, and we're going to use this sheet to kind of guide us around and use this as our focus point. So as they're moving around, yes, we're having a great time. We're moving about. We're finding all this information. We might even be doing a scavenger hunt as we're moving around. But then at the end, we can say, hey, you know what? We're going to go out and sit on a bench and we're going to have some ice cream. And as we're having our ice cream, we're going to write this paragraph. And I'm going to do that with you all so that you all can see, like, yes, we can do all of this engaging work, but this is what it also is and connects to. So it's not that this is happening, then this is happening, but we're going to marry these two things so that we can make sure that we're doing the interactive work, but we're also doing that kind of introspective reflection that should take place after those types of activities.
And if I could just tag along to what Joanne just shared, I have a son who has autism and dysgraphia, And summertime was a very difficult time for him to maintain the skills that he had just learned. So what we would do is pick out books or journals that are meant for kids. Like there's a children's reading journal that's put out by, oh, what is her name? She makes it available on her website. When I remember it, I'll share it with the group. I'm so sorry, I can't recall her name at the moment. Oh dear. But she makes all of this available on your website. You can purchase this journal online or in a bookstore, but she makes it available so that if you wanted just to print out a couple pages, and since it's geared towards kids and it's fun, even if you don't like spending the whole day in the library like I do, perhaps, start your day with a visit to the library, have them be engaged in picking out a book. Dewan was sharing about all of the community resources. The library has constant programming going on for the children during the summer. So they'll have, book talks, and they'll have craft activities. They'll have just all sorts of fun things, both for kids and parents, because I like that stuff too. And so when you have that child engaged in, having a choice and selecting a book, and then having them sit down and write a little bit of something in their pretty cute little journal that you can decorate with a bunch of stickers, you'll find that without knowing, the kid will actually be learning and may also have that opportunity to just sit in one place and, focus on one thing rather than running about. Yeah, so that's just a great thing that I did with my children that has really helped. It really helped him. I mean, to the point where, my son is now a college student. At one point we didn't know that would be possible for Josiah Kim, but that's what he's doing. And it had to do a lot with the extended school year programming that he received through his individualized education plan, as well as just the fun things we would do as a family.
I also really like the journaling idea. I think you can do it with, if they have a summer reading list from their teacher, they can ask also, supplement that with writing maybe every evening if they have like a regular reading routine where they read and then in the afternoon they write about it. I think that that's a great way to reinforce their writing skills. The other thing that I think could be kind of fun is if you do go on a vacation or to a museum or something, sending postcards to relatives or to friends about what you did, and trying to help the child to form complete sentences in the postcard, that sort of thing. We also recommend just a scrapbook, doing a scrapbook for the summer and kind of picking out words, maybe pick out words from a magazine or something that describe what you did during a day or something. Just depending on the age levels of the students, reading the story either to them or reading, if it's an older child, reading the same book that they're reading and then getting together over the dinner table to talk about what you read. It just a way to get them involved and have it be not drudgery or not a chore that they have to do all summer, but something that gives them an opportunity to engage with you as a parent.
And one thing I'll add that's not as fun, but it's something that many schools, public schools are offering, is a recruitment or what are they calling it? Remediation over the summer due to the impact of the COVID pandemic. Many of our students have unfortunately fallen behind whatever the standards of learning for, that's what they're called in the Commonwealth of Virginia. It could be different in the state that you're located in, but they could have fallen behind the curriculum just because of the world we have just emerged from, right? So public schools are offering that at no charge to general education. For special education students, those of us who have kids who really do struggle with regressing and losing some of those math, reading and writing skills over the summer, social skills as well. And Tara, like you mentioned, even the skill of just sitting, that in and of itself, the skill of being a student, those are all skills that are easily lost by a lot of our kiddos with disabilities. So extended school year services are part of a student's individualized education program. They qualify for these extended school year services, many times provided in the summer, but they can also be provided during the year. They qualify for those based upon a pattern of skill loss or regression, or perhaps recoupment for a processing or other delay that the student experiences. It can also be because right as the school year was ending, the student may have been really showing like a breakthrough skill that they've been working on all year and have finally begun to grasp. Well, in order to prevent any loss over the summer, schools will offer that child extended school year services. And even right now, I'm attending meetings from my clients where we're hammering out the details of what that individual student's extended school year services will look like. So for those parents who have children with IEPs, another resource would be to contact your child's IEP case manager or whomever is in charge of special education for your child's school to ask about extended school year services for your child.
And I'm gonna circle back to Grace again and just talk about, I know we are talking about remediation, but there's also spaces for acceleration in that same programming. And I think it's really important to be in touch with your schools because while there are a lot of programs that you pay for, especially as far as acceleration is concerned, schools right now are spending a lot of money on acceleration as well, because just like we're thinking about students who may regress, we're also thinking about students who have shown great promise even during this time of the pandemic. And we want to make sure that they're still on pace towards meeting those goals, and in some cases, kind of shattering those goals. I think of my household in these two ways. My son, who's going into his sophomore year in college, my God, had an IEP from 1st to 12th grade. And praise God, he finished his freshman year at Jackson State University. My daughter in the 11th is going to the 6th grade. She's going to middle school, and she would be on that accelerated end. And one of the things that her rising middle school is offering is a 2-week summer math acceleration. So it's an opportunity for students to not just get that kind of math acceleration, but it's also being taught by the 6th grade math teacher. So she's getting that opportunity to be in her new school with one of her teachers and getting that extra math help. And this is for free. There was another opportunity offered through the district that was 4 weeks long, 4 hours. The one that she's going to do is 2 weeks long and 2 hours a day, which we feel like is just enough for her to be able to be engaged in that way. But definitely partner with your schools to see what's available for students as far as acceleration and remediation, because both are often available. A lot of times the remediation opportunities are the ones that are advertised because they are the ones that have the most impact for students as far as retention and advancement sometimes from grade to grade, but their acceleration opportunities is available as well. You just have to ask those questions.
And I'm glad you brought up specifically the math learning loss and acceleration. I think that there are some things that a parent can do just on a daily basis to help reinforce and encourage additional math use and knowledge, like when you go shopping and like if you see a sign, depending on the age of your child, but if you see a sign that says 30% off, okay, what does that mean for this price? What does it mean for that price? Or if you go to a restaurant and you see, I hear that in the National Capital Region now there's a 5% recovery charge on restaurant, that like going in, there's a 5% charge. So not to bring up anything that stings, but you could ask your child, okay, so if we're going to spend $100 today or $50, what's 5% of that? Or cooking in the kitchen using, quarter measurements, quarter cup, half teaspoon, that kind of thing can help. Or if you're going to have, like double a recipe, then what does that mean? There are ways, depending on the ages of your children, to kind of get them thinking about math skills and using those skills, maybe even some critical reasoning skills, without it being a school task per se.
Those were really great ideas and suggestions. Thank you all. I wanted to share also that part of I am also a parent of 2 young men. We're now 20 and 22. Okay, it takes me a while to say that sometimes. But while they were growing up, anytime I asked them to sit down, they thought it was a punishment, right? So if I said sit down for dinner, they were like, why do we have to sit down? So that's why I was talking about the activity and just trying to move all the time. And also because right now, as Easter Seals Child Development Centers, we often find children who may leave us for the summer and come back in the fall. When they come back, we probably spend the first 10 days, 2 weeks, really trying to, what I'm going to call, hone them in and get them back into the routine of, this is what we do first and this is what we do next. And so those things are always really significant in the summertime. I also happen to be the mother of a child who had an IEP from 2nd grade through 12th grade. And so again, these are some of the things that looking at the extended school year, he did that from 2nd grade till 7th grade, and then all of a sudden he didn't need it anymore. So for those parents who have children who tend to need to go into the extended school year, please know that that things change, and from year to year you actually see progress, and to kind of stick with it, because there is always a way to overcome some of the barriers. And so you just kind of look for new ways to do that. So that's going to take me into my next question. Did you want to say something first, Grace, about the last question?
Oh, just about, I loved what Becky was saying about just putting a little bit of learning in throughout your day.
Into everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the 5% tax.
I know, right?
All of them. No, but I agree. Have them
Yeah.
learn just throughout the day, but not all of us have the same availability in our schedules. A lot of us are still working over the summers. And so we have to be a little bit more structured in how we get our kids to participate in the learning, which is why I think using community resources like Dewan was sharing, just getting those emails, getting on listservs, it's not hard, okay? Y'all just need to Google and you can get on these listservs, okay? It's not difficult. And then your inbox will be just full of different opportunities and things to do with your kiddos over the summer that are low cost or even free. So I highly recommend doing that. I do that all the time. I'm on the Fairfax County, the DC, the Northern Virginia Mamas, all of it.
Yeah.
And for someone who does work quite a bit over the summer, I need to make a little bit more of a structure. So, my kids get to play. My son's 20, but being on the autism spectrum, he and his 14-year-old sister are best friends. And so I make sure that they have opportunity to play, go to the pool, hang out with their friends. And so it's more of a structured time, maybe every Tuesday, Thursday, we're going to spend some time. I put it in my schedule, I put it in their schedule, and we'll go to the library, we'll go to whatever other activity, is available in the community, and then go from there. Now, I come from a culture where we do a lot of extra studying. Koreans are kind of known for extra studying, like they had to pass laws in Korea because it got so excessive. So for us, like going to like summer school and, just going to the library, my mom would borrow like all of the SAT review books from the library because there are a bunch of them there, all sorts of review books, any sort of test that your kids may be studying for, chances are it's available. AP Bio, all of it. You can just borrow it from the library rather than spending hundreds of dollars. Or you can go to a used bookstore to get it for a lot less. So at any rate, we would literally have to sit there and work on those, which is probably not everyone's dream of their childhood summer, but that's also something that you could do to make it more structured and make sure that they're getting some training and education in while still having fun.
That's interesting. So I don't know if you read that question that came from someone in our audience that was asking, how much time would you recommend putting into summer projects versus free time? So Grace, you kind of touched on that a little bit. Would anyone else like to take a stab at free time versus projects?
So I think it really depends on your child and what, I think like Grace was saying, what your family's needs are and your child's needs. Again, I think about my 2 kids, and my son needed a whole lot more structure. I relied on, again, programming through the school system to provide him with some of that structure. Because quite frankly, as a classroom teacher for, so many years, I didn't feel like teaching during the summer. So it's like, let me just go ahead and let him go with the people that want to teach during the summer, so I don't have to do that. So I could be fun mom, and we could do the museums, and we could do the zoo, and we could do all of those things that were just like, made me cool and fun. And he could do the schooling with someone else and maintain that structure. With my daughter, it's a very different ballgame. She's the kind of kid who will willingly read for hours and hours, and then go paint, and then go, oh, I'm going to make a movie and use iMovie. She's a creative kind of genius in weird ways. So for her, structure isn't really necessary. It's I try not to do a lot of structure for her, because I want to give her space to kind of breathe. And if she decides, oh, I'm going to paint a canvas today, that she has time and space for it. Like I said, I try to give her an activity per summer. So the last few summers, she's done a book club with a former teacher. So she knew that like every Wednesday I'll be reading with Miss Nova. So she would work towards that. This summer is going to be the math camp, so she'll have that. So I suggest having like one thing that's like, this is the thing, right? Either weekly or daily, this is the thing that you will be doing. And then kind of have everything else rotate around their own interests, their own what they might need and what they might want, and also what your family needs and wants. And before I forget, I just wanted to think about a couple of other resources, and I just didn't want it to slip my mind. But I am a fan of the dollar store, Five Below, and Costco. I believe that those places have some of the best educational materials, especially as people start putting out their back to school stuff earlier and earlier. You can find a lot of really cool teacher resources in those places. And a lot of times they'll have those books like for the next grade level. Costco sells like this really thick book that's for each grade level. So for things to know in first grade, things to know in second grade. And it's a great resource. Same thing with the dollar store and Five Below. You can get grade level resources that focus on specific skills. So let's say your student ended the school year and they need a lot of help with vocabulary. You can buy a book from the dollar store that just focuses on third grade vocabulary. And you can have your child work on that a page a day. It doesn't need to be a lot, but a page a day. And you might even do some trade-offs for it. You do this for a page a day, the faster you get it done, then you can get 10 minutes added onto your pool time. Or you could spend 15 minutes extra, playing your game this afternoon. But make sure that like the student isn't seeing this as punishment. Do not use reading and math as punishment. Do not. Please don't. If you are inviting your child to work on their skills, that's all it is. It should not be punishment. It should not be pulling them away from other things that they love to do, especially during the summertime. This is the schedule. This is when you work on it. Now, if you don't work on it during this time, then you'll have to make it up during other times. But it should never be used as you can't go here and you have to do this. Because then when they come back to us in the fall, they've begun to resent these things because they've been used as punishment tools throughout the summer.
That's a great point.
Great advice. Yeah.
That's a great point.
So how about this is again something that's near and dear to my heart and our hearts in early childhood. The pandemic changed everything that we do in childcare environments, and I'm going to assume in school environments. One of the things in particular in childcare is that we have very specific regulations, because it's typically regulated by the state, on how much time children can spend on any type of technology, screen time. So in our world, for children under 5, anyone who was under the age of 2 should not have any screen time, period, none, zero, none. That's what the rules say, right? For children between 3 and 5, they should not have more than 45 minutes a week of screen time. Well, during the pandemic, screen time was all we had. So we are now making this adjustment from screen time of a whole lot to no screen time. So if you can imagine, and if anyone wants to come and volunteer in any one of our centers, we are welcome. We will welcome you into our homes. But what's interesting is that we found it very difficult for children under 5 to go from I've been doing a year's worth of everything on a screen to our centers that are very heavily regulated, that says screen time for anyone under 2 is a no-no, as in you will get your hand slapped. And screen time for children between 3 and 5 is limited to 45 minutes a week, not a day, 45 minutes a week. Now, the assumption is that at home, they are having some screen time, so they don't need any of it in our centers. So I totally get where the regulation comes from. I totally understand it. But what would you say for the families who have really started to depend on screen time because of the pandemic, because we were trying to keep our children safe and trying to keep our families safe as possible? What would you say would be, I don't know, an alternative or a different resource to kind of ease in? You know, I like to do transitionings. I don't like cold turkey. That doesn't typically work for children. But how do you transition back to from the screen to live people, right? You know, faces. What do you think?
Tara, I think from my perspective, you would want to look at what are the reasons for the limitations in the first place, or the screen time. Is it because we want kids to have more physical activity? Is it because we want them to be interacting with a person rather than like a video game or something? And so assuming that it's those kinds of things, introducing physical activity even while they're using a screen for something. And I saw that with okay, I don't have kids the age that you guys do, but I have a grandchild. So I saw that with my granddaughter, where her teacher guided them through yoga and things like that. So I think even as you bring them back into the classroom, kind of tapering off the screen time, at the same time you're increasing the activity that goes along with it, or the interpersonal interaction that goes along with it, I think would be helpful. I mean, that's just off the top of my head.
Yeah, and just to maybe jump off of what Becky just said, completely agree. It's what the screen time is. That's the issue. Like, is it just watching mindless, videos, or is it actually learning or interacting? I mean, for instance, if you were to use some of the resources that we've put into, not the chat, but that we'll be sharing as a result of our conversation, a lot of those are interactive. So if you have a tutor on tutor.com, you're on screen with someone, so there's socialization and there's learning and instruction happening. If it's something like not doodle bobs, but there's some sort of like fun kids wiggling, dancing, kindergarten activity that they'll put on. Like I've watched it, can't remember what it's called. It's used in a lot of classrooms just to give the kids a motion break. That sort of thing, to me, I mean, that's encouraging action, motion, physical education. I do agree with having to transition. I mean, it was so hard to transition to being on screen all the time. It's almost like a pleasure to be able to transition away. And I'm going to say it again, the library is a great resource. It's a great resource. And they have computers there, but mainly books. I know for my children, it's such a novelty to go to the library and borrow books. It's a huge novelty. I've introduced my kids to audiobooks. Now, my son had access to it as part of his IEP, and he had what was called AIM Virginia, and I'm sure it's called different things in different states, but it's audio instructional materials, as well as textbooks and, regular just literature, fun books. And so audiobooks is a great way to keep them sort of plugged in, yet able to do other things like go for a walk while they listen to the Phantom Toll Booth, things like that.
I also think that the screen time, Grace, I believe you might be talking about Go Noodles.
Yes, Go Noodles. That.
Yes, because my daughter's school used that last year for their movement breaks, and it was a great. I would hear her, I was downstairs, she was upstairs, and I would hear her on her movement break kind of giggling along or whatever to whatever song was happening. So I think that's the one that they all use. But I also think that when we talk about screen time, it has to be a family commitment around, like, everybody's going to put down their phone. Everybody's going to put down their iPad, and we all are going to do something. And I know for me, that's a challenge because my phone is like an appendage. So it definitely becomes a challenge. to make sure that these activities are ones that we're engaging in and focusing on. We had family movie night last Sunday. And at first I thought that it was going to be an opportunity for me to get some of those final essays graded so I could kind of get some stuff done. So I had my computer and I'm like glancing up at the movie, and my daughter looked over and she was like, "You need to close that." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I've been chastised." So I closed my computer. So then of course I'm, sitting there for about 5 minutes. I pick up my phone and I'm starting, and she's like, "I'll take that too." And she takes my phone and she places it on the table, like away from me. She's like, "You can get it back afterwards." And it's like, I've been chastised. But I got the point that like, this was supposed to be family time. And she was like, "I don't have my phone down here." And she loves her phone. Like, she's good with her phone, but she didn't have her phone downstairs. So she's like, "You can't either." So when we start to tell our kids, like, this time is sacred time, like, this is no phone. We're going to be outside. We're going to do these activities, and we're all going to be unplugged. Then I think that when you are accountable to that as well, then it definitely adds to everybody kind of being unplugged and engaged with whatever is happening in that moment. But I think it has to be a family commitment. It just can't be, "Oh, I'm going to take away the 4-year-old's iPad while I'm sitting up here on my phone, scrolling mindlessly on TikTok." That's not going to work. So it really does have to be a family commitment.
Yes, I agree. You certainly have to make the commitment, and everyone has to be held accountable. As your children get older, what I've started doing is when we go out to dinner, everyone places their phone in the middle of the table. Whoever picks it up first pays the check.
My son gets his first check next week, so we'll
So it is very difficult to unplug, and I have people reminding me all the time to unplug. So thank you all for that. Those were really, really great ways to transition. And you're right, if we know why we're taking away the screen time, it makes it easier and a little bit smoother to move ourselves to a different activity. So I have another question that came in from the audience. How can we give children with special needs or disabilities a head start in their new classroom during the summer? Yeah, how do you give them a head start? I guess that's the question. Anyone want to try that one?
Well, sure. I mean, I can speak from things that school districts and my clients are currently doing, and things that they've done for my son when he was still in school. We can arrange to have, let's say that your child has difficulty with transitions, or he or she may not feel comfortable. Perhaps they're moving from one school to another, from elementary to middle to high school, and it's going to be a big change for them. Teachers have allowed these students to come, check out the classroom, meet all of their teachers, have a discussion about, any sort of fears, any sort of needs with the parents ahead of time, so that we're laying the groundwork for open communication with the school, with the teacher, around the student and their needs and transitioning. In terms of students who have social, emotional, and other types of considerations that you have to take, you need to think also whether or not it's more about peers. It's more about who will be in the class rather than the class or the building itself. I mean, in that case, I think it's important to try to, and this is something that you will have to just kind of find out within the community. So there needs to be some level of being plugged in to the special needs community at your particular school. Facebook groups are great for this, by the way. Try to have a play date perhaps and establish some type of friendship or relationship. I know that a lot of classrooms for the younger grades especially are like K-3. So many times the same children will be moving together for more than one school year, but other kids may not need that level of restriction, and they might be in general education classes. It's good for them to know who their teachers are and who their peers might be. And then of course, if you have any questions, you do have, the resource is the IEP team, but I do recognize that not always are they as available before the school year starts. This is kind of where the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You do need to just be as persistent as possible, positively persistent as possible. I'm always one to remind parents, remind everyone in a room in an IEP meeting that we're all here as adults for the sake of this child. So what can we as adults do to ensure that this child receives a free and appropriate public education? What can we do as a team? Because there's no I in team, right? What can we do? And sometimes the parent does have to be a little bit more assertive, but you don't have to be aggressive. So be persistent, be as, I guess, professional as you can, but let it be known what your concerns are. And many times schools will go out of their way to help ensure that to the greatest extent possible, there is a smooth transition. Now, that's not to say you won't face some resistance at times. You may, but again, that just means we need to get a little bit squeakier and reach out to those in the community.
Absolutely. To kind of loop back around to Grace, one of the other things and another resource, especially for our special needs students, the IEP case manager will probably be away during the summer, but the SPED coordinator for the building for your student's school will probably be working either some extra time at the end of the school year or a little bit of extra time at the beginning of the school year, because a lot of times they function as an administrator, not necessarily as a teacher, so they maintain different hours. So I would always suggest making yourself known if you aren't, especially if you're transitioning schools, make yourself known to not just the case manager, but also to the SPED coordinator, because they would be able to give you kind of the bigger viewpoint of what's happening. My son was diagnosed with ADHD in the 6th grade while he had a learning disability from 1st grade. He was officially diagnosed with ADHD in 6th grade. And that changed the way a little bit how we handled summers, because we realized that routine was important. One of the things that we decided was to continue medication during the summer. And that was something that our doctor was like, you can make the decisions to do so or not. And we decided at that time that he would continue to take meds because he was doing summer programming. He did not take medication. We went on vacation and when we went like weekends, but during the week he did. And we found that that helped him with some of his impulse control. And it also, like, as he began to develop like coping mechanisms for external stimuli, having that medication during the summer in those settings kind of gave him practice that, like, okay, I'm calm, my brain is quiet, this is what I can do in this situation. So he wasn't combating both the internal kind of craziness that he had going on in his head and the external stimuli. He could focus on developing those skills and really being able to laser focus on this, I can handle this situation, this, how I can do this. So when he transitioned into the school year, it wasn't like a brand new thing. It's something he was able to practice during the summertime. So now as a, college student, he's very able to like regulate, all right, I need to take my meds on Monday and Wednesday because that's when I have these classes, and I don't have to take them on Tuesday and Thursday because I don't have to go to class. So he's developed like these strategies that I'm like, okay, if it works for you, fine. But I definitely think that like talking to your children, especially if medication is involved, talking to the pediatrician, talking to the doctor that's prescribing to see what kind of schedules you want to maintain during the summertime, so that your children are still able to process in ways that are going to help them best when they go back to school. I also think that when I look at a lot of my SPED population from last year, a lot of the struggle with them did not necessarily have to do with their skill level. It had to do with motivation. And a lot of my students with IEPs really just struggled with getting to it. And it's like, once they got to the assignment, it's like, oh, I can kind of do this. But it was this motivation to kind of get revved up. And it took a long time for some of them, months even for some of them to kind of get worked up to the point where they're like, oh, we can do some work. And I know that a lot of it was pandemic related because they were not in buildings, they really weren't accountable. But I really think for some students, especially those who struggle with IEPs or not, but if there's motivation is an issue. And I think that maintaining some type of schedule and keeping some type of reinforcement in place so that students are not losing that kind of drive, because that tends to be harder than anything else in the classroom. It's like, I can teach you how to do the stuff. It's like, but you have to come to the table. And if you're not coming to the table, then I can't feed you, right? I can't feed you if you're out in the field running about. I can only feed you if you're at the table. And getting kids mentally and emotionally at the table tends to be the struggle. So if families can help us by maintaining that during the summer as much as possible and not letting all of it lapse, the motivation piece itself, then it just makes things easier. Just make them teachable, you know, like get them to the table and we can handle the rest of it, but make them able to be there with us.
That is really important, Dewan. Thanks for sharing that with us. To get them prepared to come in motivated. Motivation. Wow, write a book about that. I promise you, it'll sell out really quickly, because the motivation piece was always difficult for me when my children were younger. My youngest is 17 now, and she is academically strong. She loves learning. I really don't have to get her to do anything when it comes to academics. You know, I am trying to get her to go outside and run around because otherwise she'll sit in the house all day. So I think that that's those are great things. So as we are looking at the last 9 or 10 minutes or so, is there anything that you all would like to share with us as we start to wrap up a little bit? Is there something that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure that you communicate with those people who have tuned in?
Thanks for that opportunity, Tara. I think one thing that I wanted to add, and it's for available for any child, not just children who have special needs or children who are neurotypical, but MSEC has a resource called School Quest, and School Quest provides an online platform where a parent can look up the graduation requirements in the school system, that if they're already there or if they're moving to it, can get an idea of what's happening in a given area before they get there, and also keep track of their students. You know, that you can keep track of their IEP, you can keep track of the classes that they've taken, the transcripts that they have. And so it's at our website, which is militarychild.org. And the name of the tool is School Quest. So that's something that nobody checks your ID to see if you're a military family when you sign up for this resource. So it's something that parents can find helpful, whether they're moving or not, but just a way to kind of keep track of everything that's happening academically for their child.
One resource that I always try to make sure, and it's not necessarily a resource, but it's more of information. One thing that I try to make sure that all of my families are aware of when I'm working with students and families is that they are either able to tell me what their child's reading level is or what their child's Lexile level is. Your child's teacher at the end of the year should be able to provide that information. So typically, if your child is in elementary school, they'll receive a reading level that's a letter. And that letter is typically from A to X. They usually don't go all the way to C. Once they get to X, they move to something else. But like A to X. And where your child is in that range of A to X kind of determines what books your child can read, or what text, I'm not going to say books, but what text your child can read independently, they can read with assistance, or that they cannot read, like they just can't access. What that's helpful for is that when you go on these library trips, you kind of know what kind of books to get. And I always advise that you get some books that your kid can read independently. Some books that they can just pick up on their own, go off in a corner and just get wrapped up and they can read alone. Then always get a couple of books that they can read at their instructional level, which means that you might have to sit with them and read with them. But that's going to be the book that's going to help them with their vocabulary, also going to help them with their comprehension. So if they move to the next grade level, they've already had some of that learning take place. I typically say, well, I don't really say this, but most of the reading specialists would say to avoid books that are within a child's frustration level. That is the books that are like far above their reading level. I think those are the books that parents should be reading aloud to their kids. So if it's not a book that your child can read on their own, that should be a book that you could, so if your child is not at the level, one of my favorite books over the last couple of years has been the Children of Blood and Bone series. It's so good. But it would be like, you know, if a kid is really into like fantasy, but also like if they love Black Panther, but they like fantasy, it just kind of mixes all of that together. Cool book. But it might be above their actual Lexile level, but they really like the story. So that might be a bedtime reading story that you read to your child instead of having them read it independently. As your child gets older, they would move out of having that A through X level to having a Lexile, which is a number. And that number has a grade level band. So let's say that a child is at an 800, that would be a like 5th and 6th grade level. So you could walk into the library and literally say, hey, my kid's Lexile is like an 800 and they're here. And your librarian would be able to suggest text that would be able to help you. So those, I think, are really easy ways of being able to hone in on your child's strengths and also move them along the continuum of reading without like doing a whole bunch of extra work. It's just a library visit with a little bit more information.
And I'll just add, y'all know I love the library. Part of it is my mom is a librarian. I just need to put that out there in case you're wondering why I'm so obsessed with the library. My mom's a librarian. And she turned me on to Overdrive, which was, that's back in New York. I don't live in New York anymore, but here in Virginia, our Fairfax County Public Libraries use Libby. So if you're familiar with any of these, they are online or on an app on your phone, libraries where you can borrow, download audiobooks, as well as digital versions or ebooks. And you don't need a specialized e-reader. You can read it just on your phone or on your computer screen. And for those of us who might be taking trips during the summer, well, we can bring the library with us, which is wonderful. And then also, just kind of a hot tip, if you have a relative who might live in a different area and they're willing to share their library card privilege with you, because this is something that I found out my husband's aunt was doing, because she watches her grandkids in 2 different states. So when she's with one set of grandkids, she's getting books for them and the other set books for them. Well, she was able to access Libby and Overdrive and all of these other, because different states have different programs through which you could download ebooks and borrow. Well, you're borrowing them for 21 days usually. And it's a wonderful way to keep your kids reading even on the road while you're traveling. And also, let's say your child might be a reluctant reader. You know, graphic novels are amazing. One of the first graphic novels that my son read was March, and it was fantastic. And he loved it. And so, you know, we all read March. We have a bunch of graphic novels that the children enjoy. It can also spark a love of art, which is something that, you know, my daughter has begun doing as well. So, hot tip. Online books, e-readers, audiobooks available for free through your public library. And if your kid doesn't like so much the books, graphic novels. And they're written, I'm not talking about like comic books, although, you know, if that's your thing, that's great. I'm talking about actual novels that have Lexile reading levels that are written for, you know, our kids, children.
One more resource that I want to say to folks, for some kids, like having a final product, I saw one of the questions during the chat was about like projects and stuff. And this is something that I did this year with my daughter, kind of by happenstance, but it ended up being dope. My daughter wrote this beautiful short story for school, but it was about her granny's visit during Christmas time. It was like a beautiful story. So I was like, for Mother's Day, I was like, I should get this published. Well, Barnes and Noble has a program where you can publish any book for like $3 a book. And the book isn't big, it's like a 4x6, but they have they do the cut, you just send in, you type up the manuscript and you just make sure that it goes by the sizes that you I think it took me longer to like type the manuscript. I think like getting the sizing down took me about 30 minutes. So you can do the cover, you can do the back cover. So her book has a cover, it has an author page, it has all of that. And it cost me like $3.95 a book. The shipping is a little bit more. So I think for 3 books, getting them shipped to me, it was like $16. Now I say that because you might, all of these ideas about, you know, what we've done this summer, you might say, you know what, you're going to publish a book this summer. And then that might give your child a little bit of, you know, motivation to say, oh my gosh, then yes, I got to write this because this is going to go in a published book. Places like, it's not, what's it's the camera thing. We get like the calendars.
Shutterfly.
Yeah, Shutterfly. You can do like pictures or whatever with Shutterfly. And the cool thing about Barnes and Noble is that it's the personal side and then it's the vendor side. You can always choose to have your book switched from the personal side and actually have it available for sale on the vendor side. So you could actually like put your child's book up for sale and like have relatives buy it or whatever. And I've thought about doing that, but we gave my daughter
amazing.
We kept one for the house. We gave one to her teacher and we sent one to her grandmother for Mother's Day. And it ended up being like the best gift is something great to have in the house, like of her writing. But it was just like, I think it took like a week and a half for us once I finished, you know, sent everything off. It took like 7 days for us to get the book.
Wow.
So your kid could have like an account of their summer by the time they go back to school in the fall. And, you know, everyone's like, what did you do this summer? Your child can pull out a book and be like, well, this is what I did, and pass it around the classroom. So I just thought that was like a really dope idea. And I know my daughter's teacher said that she's going to share that with families next year.
Yeah.
But like I said, $16 for 3 published books, you can't beat that. You can't beat that at all.
That
Barnes
is
and Noble
awesome.
also has free events.
Yes, they have. And Michael's has free events.
Michael's, yes.
Oh, Michael's.
So does Home Depot.
Yes.
So you learn how to build your own bookshelf and then you can go fill it with books.
Yes. So like all of
you wrote.
Michael's has some amazing free events. And you know, again, we always sign up for them. We're like, well, I feel like going. But it's available. But yeah, the Barnes and Noble thing, please publish your kids' books. It's great.
Yes. That is awesome.
One last thing, Tara, and I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't say this out loud. Khan Academy. It's great.
Khan Academy. Right. That's right. That's right. Okay. Oh, it's 3:01. Oh my gosh. Okay. So we are out of time. I want to thank you all. This has been a fantastic discussion. Fantastic resources. Thank you all so much. We know that libraries are purposeful, and we will make sure that we use the library in every neighborhood and community. We certainly know that Barnes and Noble has gotten at least 5 hits to their website so far. And we totally understand that no one is checking ID for military, the military family resources. So I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us today, for helping us to participating in our candid conversations, and for sharing this information with families so that we can help to prevent or mitigate as much as possible some of the summer slide that we often see when the fall sessions begin. So thank you again, and thank you for Meester Sills.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a great summer.